Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's talk. This is FOMO in Android. And to start with, it's FOMO, or fear of missing out, that actually has become a common trend for a lot of people, not just Android engineers, but in our day-to-day life. But this talk is more rather directed towards the Android developers we have. So why I'm trying to say a FOMO in Android is because in Android engineering, it has become a lot of daunting task to catch up with entire Android ecosystem till now. And to start with, I'll have a disclaimer. This is a personal experience to come up with. This might not be related to anyone, and this could be a factual thing. So now, to start with the entire talk, I have to definitely have this thing here. This entire talk is sponsored by NordVPN. And do watch this video or the talk till last to have something for you all. Now, jokes apart, I work at NordVPN as an Android engineer. I'm also an expert for Kotlin as well as Android, and I was there in India. And I create some smaller libraries for open source in GitHub. If you want to follow, there's the username. So now, this talk will also be very much directed towards questioning as well, so feel free to answer if you want to, or else we can just have someone directly being picked up from the crowd. So how many of you actually watched Google I/O? And what are the things, few of the things that you were actually excited for? Mine was Pixel Fold, but too costly to buy. So anything, if anybody wants to do? AI? OK. There were a lot of things. So just to list it down, we had these few things which I could think of where majority of the times being said or used in the entire Google I/O presentation. The Palm 2. There was Google Bard, right? But which we cannot use still in Germany. There was Fold, the one which has been the talk of the town. The other one is the Project Tailwind. Starline was the amazing another one, which I am actually excited for. I don't know when I can try it for. And there are many, many more, right? And any of the things which you were excited for in this list, apart from Fold, obviously. Anyone? Ouch. OK, to move on to our own specific things, let's talk about for Android. How was this for you as an Android engineer? Any guesses you want to try? How was for Android engineers in this Google I/O? OK. Let's start with this. The few things which I could jot it down in this presentation slide were the Android Studio tooling, the ever-improving one. I like it, but still, it does not work all the time for me, at least. Then there was the passkey support, which was coming out with the removal of passwords. Then we have the form factor. And yesterday, we had an amazing talk around that. Right? There was the privacy and security in Android 14, the new thing which we are talking about. We had Jetpack Glance widget thing, which was for alpha now. The Compose for TV. That's one thing which is, again, in alpha, but coming soon to everyone, I think. KMM. That's one thing we always keep talking about, but it's still there. We have the foreground services, which has been coming with new restrictions. There are a studio bot, again, not in Germany. Sorry? Ouch. Now, then we have this amazing ARD14 for us, and there were amazing multi-more, right? There were a lot of things which were released for Android in this Google I/O, but a lot of things which we still cannot try. But to start off with everything, this was the tip of an iceberg, and there are every day something new coming up, be it a Google I/O or not, or be it any Dev Summit or any event. There will always be things coming, and we as Android engineers have one task for sure, that we have to keep ourselves updated. That's for sure. Now, about the every entire thing which we talked about in the last previous slide, we were just eventually getting started. So the bigger thing is, we have few questions to move around before we see further slides in my talk, that we have to actually address the biggest elephant in the room. Now, as an Android engineer, we have to introspect. In the previous slide, what do we exactly have to learn? Because there are 20 things coming out in the I/O. There will be 50 more things coming out in the next one. How would we be catching up with what things we have to learn? Even before that, we have to understand how do we have to learn it, right? Because there are, let's say, for example, Android Studio tooling thing. How do we learn it if it does not work for us? So there are things which you have to figure out, but the bigger question here always comes, why do I need to learn it? Because to figure out why, everything starts falling out that do we actually need this thing? Do we actually need this product? As a company or as any product manufacturer, they will always keep coming out with thousands of things. For example, Samsung, they have millions of devices, but we actually go and select one, which works for us. So that's the point. Why do we need to actually learn anything, let it be in Android or any ecosystem? These are first points which I have personally experienced. Why do I specifically need to learn, and why I do need to do anything which is new coming to the market? Firstly, I only jump to learn anything if this is necessary to learn for us. Not because it is fancy, not because everything is doing it around. This has to be why I need it. The better example for us has to be Jetpack Compose. It gets FOMO for everyone if we don't learn Jetpack Compose right now, because everyone else definitely is doing it. Second, when we start doing it in our project which we work in our jobs, we cannot just integrate anything, let's say for an example, an alpha library, just because it's new and fancy. We have to learn as if we have to think around as a firm, or we have to think around if it's really needed there. And introspection is definitely necessary when we start picking up any new library, no matter a technology or anything, right? Now, the next slide, I actually picked up from one of the dialogues we have in an Indian movie. So I edited it and made it very much similar to what can suit for the Android engineers. Like when we start doing a task, we have to do the business, then we do for the user needs, and if we have some time left, we have to do it for the team, right? That's pretty much how the ecosystem has been evolving around. And around that time, we definitely start doing or learning what we as a user need, as a developer need. Now, that was too much of theoretical things. Now, specifically related to Android. This is the question we always ask, or used to ask. What is an activity lifecycle? Right? Everybody who has at least interviewed once would have faced this interview. Now, if I have to migrate it to a new version, what is a developer lifecycle for Android engineers? Anybody wants to try that? So for us, we have relations to libraries and APIs. And yesterday there was a talk where, and I think last year as well, Ash Davis had a talk. Everything has an API. So if you have to think about it, we have this life cycle which goes on in an Android engineer's life, where we have launching of libraries always coming around, no matter what. Then there is a deprecation of libraries, which we always have to handle. And as a fun fact, which I always say, the Android deprecated annotation was deprecated as well. And at the last point, we have the migration to do. So basically, a lot of libraries are launched, a lot of things were deprecated, and we still keep doing the migration all over again. To put things in number, every time we work around something in our project, there are 20, 25 libraries, and it keeps updating always. 20 is just a smaller number, but in a more bigger app, you will always see a lot of libraries. So there are always 20 new libraries coming around. For example, the Compose TV, that would be always a new one. Then there will always be libraries which will deprecate it, but we still keep doing it. And we always keep figuring it out, that what we have to do the next one. And then the entire process for us takes a lot of time. And as I say, this is still a part of our job description, but we still have to keep our project up to date with all the process. So for me, that's an actual Android developer's life cycle which we have to go through in our entire job time. So if you have to summarize the libraries in one way, this is it. Catch me if you can. Because every month, every time, while coming to this talk, I just got an update on my GitHub repository that Compose Bomb has been updated to 1.06. So now we have to update to that. So every time there is something, there's always a catching up to do with all the libraries we have. Now, moving on. We have talked about the libraries, how we have to manage, and what do we manage, but we have to specifically talk about FOMO. For me, it's to see amazing people doing amazing things around, right? But more than FOMO, my major point to discuss here is FOSM. And I have coined this term. I don't know if this actually exists. This actually means fear of social media, which I have been going through a lot. And every time I open a social media, no matter it's Thread or Twitter, there is something new. Thread has to come in. So for FOSM, there are few things which are always bullet down here. For example, if I consider Twitter, every time you use Twitter, you will always see thousands of tweets always going around, floating around. And with the people we are surrounded with, it's always necessary to always keep updated what people have been up to, right? Second, we always keep seeing new things being launched. No matter, it could be an open source library, it could be any official sourcing library, anything which has been getting launched. There is always some new job switches that makes you in FOMO again, that should I be working here or I switch again? That's always a question we keep. How long is too much to be in a company? Last, every cool stuff which people show off. I always keep seeing amazing people doing amazing library animations in Compose, and they keep sharing, which I always think someday I will check their source code, how they have done it. But it's always in my to-do list, and I've never been completed. So to, again, summarize this entire thing, there are always 1,000 times all the messages you always see, be it in social media, Twitter, WhatsApp groups, or even Telegram groups. For example, we have a couple of Telegram groups of Android engineers. When you open once, it will be 0 messages, and the next day you open, it will be 1,000 of messages. There's always a flow which keeps going around. That's a number of requests we keep up track to. Now, the bigger question was always for me was, am I at the right place for checking out everything at the right time? Because I surf social media while traveling, but for me it keeps changing because there are n number of things which I actually don't know, and I want to learn, but I don't know how to set up my time according to it. So that's my question always, am I at the right place at the right time? But before that, what happens on social media for me as a user is I have to see what's trending on social media. And there are a number of things, but I want to jolt it down very close to Android ecosystem, what's happening here. We always have KMM, and I swear I have a huge FOMO on that. I have not tried it yet, but I want to go with this. Then we have now Android 14 and its migration, the plan of migration, what we support in Android 14, that is always being trending right now recently. Then we have Kotlin, the new 1.9 version released yesterday. Now the K2 compiler is coming up. So there's a hype around that. People have been talking about it. Now, there is a new flow of people discussing architectures. There are people who keep discussing, do we go MVP, MVVM, Redux? There are questions around that. Then we have testing. Testing UI, maybe, unit testing, even a flow interaction testing, anything. We always keep seeing that. We have always ever-growing Compose. Something around that you will always see in a one scroll of a tweet. Then we have good open source libraries that we always keep seeing people do it. And everything, sometimes it is a part which we don't know. For me, I always see something every time in the scrolling list, which I would definitely not be knowing it. I would bookmark it or save it somewhere to see, but I never revisit there. So when I start learning something, I have to first figure out, what do I learn and where do I learn from? What are the right places? Definitely, social media is a place not to learn from. Like, I definitely agree, people are there, we follow people, we check what they have been doing. But I do not, and I have not been following, there are times where people push on threads of saying, this is not the right thing to do, this is not things to do. My only observation to it, if this works for me, this works for me as well. This has to work for me, because it does not matter if this does not work for anyone else. Then we have the Android documentation. Recently, I would definitely say that Android documentation is the most improved thing we have. Compared to where we started and compared to what we have now, the documentation has improved heaps and bounds. The blogs. There are n number of blogs that have been going by developers, by Android itself. They have good documentation collection of it, and there is some GitHub open repository which has a collection of everything. So we can always follow that. Now, videos. YouTube has to be the biggest classroom for any of us here, because anything you want to find, you will always find in YouTube. And if you don't find it there, you want a very curated content, you can go to different sites where you have open courses, maybe paid ones. If that solves the problem, that's a good enough, right? And then we have open source projects. For me, any day, this has to be the best learning platform because, for example, Retrofit is one of the best libraries written. But to understand how that was written, we can understand the API libraries or architectures we can follow, the coding practices they have been following there, right? So to summarize again, this entire 5 points into one is try to learn from experience. It could be the experience of a developer building that. It could be a developer working on that. It could be a developer building a library. It has to be basically learned from experiences. That's it. Now, the bigger question again will arise, how to cope up with all the FOSS or FOMO. Because we can be in FOMO, but we have to decide what we have to cope up with, right? Now, this is again another dialogue which I have copied somewhere. Run behind usability, excellence will follow. And the pretty much which I have been following till now is it's okay to say no, rather be in FOMO. This is a line a friend gave me, and this actually fits this bill here right now. Now, understanding the depth of what is necessity and what do we need to know as a knowledge. And again, I'll put this disclaimer that this is coming from my experience and few people I have chatted with that might not be applicable to you. So for me, the first is don't be an engineer first, be a user first. So sometimes, and I have been guilty of that I have did over-engineering a couple of times which would not solve easy problems, which could be done in a better way, in an easier way. But to think doing as an over-engineering, sometimes it feels like it is a cool thing to do. And I have been guilty of that. But as a user, nobody knows what's going behind the app. For them, it's a button, it will still click. It's a screen which will still do a transition. It doesn't matter what we do beneath it. Then, the other one is obviously because there is a fanciness of coming around, and we don't need to over-engineer around that. Knowing what we know is in depth is more important rather than knowing everything going around in the market. So what I know should be important for me to know it in depth in the core of how it is happening, rather than just saying that I have used something and I know how can I use it. Then, improving of what we know is much important. Like, you cannot be stagnant at a point, because when you start learning, you have to also make sure that you improve on what you have been doing till now. Lastly, learn only when you need it. As I mentioned earlier, you cannot always keep learning at a point when you start discussing that, okay, there is this new cool library we should be integrating in our project, even knowing the effects it would create in your project. It might be a very good one, and it could also lead to some crashes, some bugs. It could not be stable. So first, you need to learn when you need to use it, right? And this is one point I always stress on. You cannot know everything. Before coming to Germany, I was very bad at testing. So I can know that I did not know testing. Now I needed it, and now I do the testing as I want. But you cannot know everything as a developer, and you will still be doing just fine. You don't need to know everything in your life. Now, coming around the biggest myth which I have been facing about Android. So, as you discuss to other folks who are not Android developers, they will always keep on saying, dude, you are just an Android front-end framework. You don't do anything else. It's only an UI. But the best part is, there's nothing to do in Android apart from just parsing JSON. And the JSON has to come from a backend, and that's it. That's pretty much what you have to do. And even that is not an effort you need to put yourself into. Retrofit does that for you. So that's pretty much what Android is. Let's not talk to managers about it. Right? Now the myth breaker was, if you see the Play console, you will always see there are almost 12,000 devices we make for, and not 4 of them where we need to test only on few of them, right? Oh, okay. There are n number of deprecations as well in Android when we start handling it, correct? And I will stress this as much as I can. This is not just another front-end framework, because it is unlike other languages where every week there is a new framework coming out. We have different OEMs, and this is a pain every Android engineer has faced, be it Huawei, Xiaomi, anything. They will restrict your apps, they will kill it on your background, anything. And then we have to figure out, this works on my machine, how do I run it on there, right? We have multiple devices to handle, as I said, the 12,000 ones. We have 14 different versions now. We have to make sure that it is backported to an actual version we start working at. And the new one which is in the town is the form factor. We cannot just build for a portrait landing thing and we expect it to work on a foldable device. These all things we have to work, and we need to make sure that we work as a framework, not as a front-end framework. Now, frequently asked questions was always this thing which I see on Twitter, get on LinkedIn, or something pretty much there. Is it the right time to start Android? This is a question I always get, and I always see on Twitter or LinkedIn that this is the right time or not. For me, you cannot predict the future. It has to be at that point. If you like doing Android engineering, you should pretty much go with it. If not, maybe we can dive into something else. But deciding right time or not, there will never be a right time for that. The biggest, even bigger question to this is native versus hybrid. One of the questions everybody asked, yesterday even, I think in the fireside chat, somebody asked, do I go to Flutter or do I still keep doing Compose? This is, again, the answer I have built around that it depends on what user needs, what your product needs. And there was a very good quote from one of my friends. He said that there were n number of hybrid frameworks that has come and gone. Native was still there, is still here, and will always be there, and without native, no cross-platform can ever exist. It has to still run on the native using some bridges. That's what I heard. So that's a pretty good way to summarize that native and hybrid, even Flutter, React Native, they are here to coexist. You just cannot say one will be there, other will die. They are here to coexist. Now, the other point is Compose versus XML. This is the best topic. Whenever you open Twitter, you'll always find this. Why Compose is bad and why XML is the best. Compose is still evolving. It will take time to be the best or in the performance sector of XML. But Compose, no matter how much people hate it, it has solved a lot of problems for developers here. We don't have to write adapters anymore. We can use declarative UI. Again, XML is still a good thing to learn because not all applications have been ported to Compose. We still have XMLs, and we'll still be using it. Now, to summarize and have a con, what we have in FOMO, and what's the problematic thing of it. FOMO can have an actual negative impact when we start living a world which we don't live in. We start getting hyped over things which people have been doing, and that's pretty much gets us a negative impact, which we, as a person, starts feeling a decreased productivity, which does not lead us to something good. And that's a personal experience which I have felt in my previous firm. And apart from that, it reduces the creativity at the peak of the point. Because as a developer, if you're not creative enough to do anything, maybe sometimes you're doing something wrong, which we need to summarize. And with that, I think that's it. But I have something for you. If you pull out the cameras, there is something to scan for. If you want, there is, that's a shameless promotion again. But I got this to share, if anybody wants to share. I got to share, sorry. And with that, people are still clicking. Thank you so much, everyone, for hearing this rant.